me a moment. So, Prabhuji, thank you very much for your encouragement. You put me on a pedestal where I don't belong to. I think it's because of the mercy of senior devotees and good friends like you, whose inspiration has helped me a lot. So, we'll start then the class. Unfortunately, I do not have a kartal here, so I'll just sing. Please forgive me. My video is okay, Prabhuji, right? I mean, I had some problems in the beginning today in the morning. Is it okay now?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallava Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallava Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallava Girivaradhari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramams Pariprachakacharya Stottar Shatashi Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Maharaj Prabhupada ki Jai Jai Vishnupad Paramams Pariprachakacharya Stottar Shatashi Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki Jai ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai 125th appearance day of Patita Pavan Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Anant Koti Vaishnava Vrind ki Jai Brahmacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advait Gadadhar Shivas Adi Shri Gaurav Govind ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopal Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki Jai Shri Radha Madhav ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Jai Shri Mayapur Dham ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham ki Jai Ganga Mai ki Jai Yamuna Mai ki Jai Tulsi Devi ki Jai Bhakti Devi ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai Brihad Mridanga Transcendental Book Distribution ki Jai December Book Marathon ki Jai Samavita Bhakta ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaurav Pramanande Shri Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the Shri Guru and Shri Guru. All glories to Shri Prabhupada. Okay. Thank you, Karuna Prabhu, for giving me this service to talk about the verses from Canto 1, Chapter 9, 25, 26, and 27. So, yes, I can see you've shared that. Okay, fine. We'll start with the verses, what were translations, and purport. Verse number 25, 1.9.25. Okay. Sutta Vacha Yudhishthirastad Akarnya Shayanam Sharapanjare Aprichat Vividhan Dharman Rishinam Chanushinvatam. Sutta Uvacha. Sri Sutta Goswami said. Give me a moment, let me hide my window. Okay. Yudhishthira, King Yudhishthira. Tat, that. Akarnya, hearing. Shayanam, lying down. Sharapanjare, on the bed of arrows. Aprichat, asked. Vividhan, multifarious. Dharman, duties. Rishinam, of the rishis. Cha, and. Anu Srinvatam. Yeah, actually, Anu Srinvatam. Hearing after. Translation by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Sutta Goswami said, Maharaj Yudhishthira, after hearing Bhishma Deva speak in that appealing tone, asked him, in presence of all the great rishis, about the essential principles of various religious duties. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Bhishma Deva, speaking in that appealing tone, convinced Maharaj Yudhishthira that he was very soon passing away can't see the last word. And Maharaj Yudhishthira was inspired by Lord Sri Krishna to ask him of the principles of religion. Lord Sri Krishna inspired Maharaj Yudhishthira to ask Bhishma Dev in the presence of many great sages, indicating thereby that the Lord's devotee like Bhishma Dev, although apparently living as a worldly man, is far superior to many great sages, even Vyasadeva. Another point is that Bhishma Deva at that time was not only lying on a deathbed of arrows, but was greatly aggrieved because of that state. One should not have asked him any question at that time, but Lord Sri Krishna wanted to prove that his pure devotees are always sound in body and mind by dint of spiritual enlightenment. And thus, in any circumstances, a devotee of the Lord is in perfect order to speak of the right way of life. Yudhishthira also preferred to solve his problematic questions by asking Bhishma Deva rather than ask anyone else present there who was seemingly more learned than Bhishma Deva. This is all due to the arrangement of the great wheel carrier Lord Sri Krishna, who establishes the glories of his devotee. The father likes to see the son become more famous than himself. The Lord declares very emphatically that worship of his devotee is more valuable than the worship of the Lord himself. So 1.9.26. Purusha Swabhava Vihitan Yatha Varnam Yatha Ashramam Vairagya Ragopadhivyam Amnato Bhaya Lakshanam. What translations? Purusha, the human being, Swabhava, by his own acquired qualities, Vihitan, prescribed, Yatha, according to, Varnam, classification of castes, Yatha, according to, Ashramam, orders of life, Vairagya, detachment, Raga, attachment, Upadibhyam, out of such designations, Amnata, systematically, Ubhaya, both, Lakshanan, symptoms. Translation. At Maharaj Yudhishthira's inquiry, Bhishma Dev first defined all the classifications of castes and orders of life in terms of the individual's qualifications. Then he systematically, in twofold divisions, described counteraction by detachment and interaction by attachment. It's a beautiful translation. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The conception of 4 castes and 4 orders of life as planned by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 4.13 is to accelerate transcendental qualities of the individual person so that he may gradually realize his spiritual identity and thus act accordingly to get free from material bondage or conditional life. In almost all the Puranas, the subject matter is described in the same spirit. And so also in the Mahabharata, it is more elaborately described by Bhishma Deva in the Shanti Parva, beginning from the 60th chapter. The Varnashram Dharma is prescribed for the civilized human being just to train him to successfully terminate human life. Self-realization is distinguished from the life of the lower animals, engaged in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. Bhishma Deva advised for all human beings 9 qualifications. Okay, these are really important now. Not to become angry, not to lie, to equally distribute wealth, to forgive, to beget children only by one's legitimate wife, to be pure in mind and hygienic in body, not to be inimical toward anyone, to be simple, to support servants or subordinates. One cannot be called a civilized person without acquiring the above-mentioned preliminary qualities. Besides these, the Brahmanas, the intelligent men, the administrative men, the mercantile community, and the laborer class must acquire special qualities in terms of occupational duties mentioned in all the Vedic scriptures. For the intelligent men, controlling their senses is the most essential qualification. It is the basis of morality. Sex indulgence, even with a legitimate wife, must also be controlled, and thereby family control will automatically follow. An intelligent man abuses his great qualifications if he does not follow the Vedic way of life. This means he must seriously make a study of the Vedic literatures, especially of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. For learning Vedic knowledge, one must approach a person who is 100% engaged in devotional service. He must not do things which are forbidden in the Shastras. A person cannot be a teacher if he drinks or smokes. In the modern system of education, the teacher's academic qualification is taken into consideration without evaluation of his moral life. Therefore, the result of education is misuse of high intelligence in so many ways. The Kshatriya, the member of the administrative class, is especially advised to give charity and not to accept charity in any circumstances. Modern administrators raise subscriptions for some political functions, but never give charity to the citizens in any state function. It is just the reverse in the injunctions of the Shastras. The administrative class must be well versed in the Shastras, but must not take to the profession of teachers. The administrators should never pretend to become non-violent and thereby go to hell. When Arjuna wanted to become a non-violent coward on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he was severely chastised by Lord Sri Krishna. The Lord degraded Arjuna at that time to the status of an uncivilized man for his avowed acceptance of the cult of non-violence. The administrative class must be personally trained in military education. Cowards should not be elevated to the presidential throne by dint of numerical votes only. The monarchs were all chivalrous personalities, and therefore monarchy should be maintained, provided the monarch is regularly trained in the occupational duties of a king. In fighting, the king or the president should never return home without being hurt by the enemy. The so-called king of today never visits the war field. He is very much expert in artificially encouraging the fighting strength in the hope of false national prestige. As soon as the administrative class is turned into a gang of mercantile and laborer men, the whole machinery of government becomes polluted. The Vaishyas, the members of the mercantile communities, are especially advised to protect the cows. Cow protection means increasing the milk productions, namely curd and butter. Agriculture and distribution of the foodstuff are the primary duties of the mercantile community, backed by education in Vedic knowledge and trained to give in charity. As the Kshatriyas were given charge of the protection of the citizens, Vaishyas were given the charge of the protection of animals. Animals are never meant to be killed. Killing of animals is a symptom of barbarian society. For a human being, agricultural produce, fruits and milk are sufficient and compatible foodstuffs. Beg your pardon. The human society should give more attention to animal protection. The productive energy of the laborer is misused when he is occupied by industrial enterprises. Industry of various types cannot produce the essential needs of man, namely rice, wheat, grains, milk, fruits, and vegetables. The production of machines and machine tools increases the artificial living fashion of a class of vested interests and keeps thousands of men in starvation and unrest. This should not be the standard of civilization. The Shudra class is less intelligent and should have no independence. They are meant for rendering sincere service to the three higher sections of the society. The Shudra class can attain all comforts of life simply by rendering service to the higher classes. It is especially enjoined that a Shudra should never bank money. As soon as the Shudras accumulate wealth, it will be misused for sinful activities in wine, women, and gambling. Wine, women, and gambling indicate that the population is degraded to less than Shudra quality. Sorry again. Prabhupada has mentioned that in italic. Okay. The higher castes should always look after the maintenance of the Shudras, and they should provide them with old and used garments. The Shudra should not leave his master when the master is old and invalid, and the master should keep the servants satisfied in all respects. The Shudras must first of all be satisfied by some food and clothing before any sacrifice is performed. In this age, so many functions are held by spending millions, but the poor laborer is not sumptuously fed or given charity, clothing, etc. The laborers are thus dissatisfied, and so they make agitation. The Varnas are, so to speak, classifications of different occupations, and Ashrama Dharma is gradual progress on the path of self-realization. Both are interrelated and one is dependent on the other. The main purpose of ashram dharma is to awaken knowledge and detachment. The Brahmacharya Ashram is the training ground for the prospective candidates. In this ashram, it is instructed that this material world is not actually the home of the living being. The conditioned souls under material bondage are prisoners of matter, and therefore self-realization is the ultimate aim of life. The whole system of ashrama dharma is a means to detachment. One who fails to assimilate this spirit of detachment is allowed to enter into family life with the same spirit of detachment. Therefore, one who attains detachment may at once adopt the fourth order, namely renounced, and thus live on charity only, not to accumulate wealth, but just to keep body and soul together for ultimate realization. Household life is for one who is attached, and the Vanaprastha and Sannyasa orders of life are for those who are detached from material life. The Brahmacharya Ashram is especially meant for training both the attached and detached. What a beautiful purport. Amazing. Okay, was it the last one, Prabhu? I think there was another one, right?
Yes, Prabhu.
There was, are you sharing the video? Okay, fine. Yeah, this is about Dharma, 1.9.27. Dana dharman, Raja dharman, Moksha dharman, Vibhagasha, Stri dharman, Bhagavad dharman, Samasa Vyasa Yogata. Dana dharman, the acts of charity. Raja dharman, pragmatic activities of the kings. Moksha dharman, the acts for salvation. Vibhagasha, by divisions. Stri dharman, duties of women. Bhagavad dharman, the acts of the devotees. Samasa, generally. Vyasa, explicitly. Yogataha, by means of translation. He then explained by divisions acts of charity, the pragmatic activities of a king, and activities for salvation. Then he described the duties of women and devotees, both briefly and extensively. Purport by His Divine Grace, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. To give charity is one of the householder's main functions, and he should be prepared to give in charity at least 50% of his hard-earned money. A brahmachari or a student should perform sacrifices. A householder should give charity, and a person in the retired life or in the renounced order should practice penances and austerities. Those are the general functions of all the ashramas or orders of life on the path of self-realization. In the brahmachari life, the training is sufficiently imparted so that one may understand that the world as property belongs to the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. No one therefore can claim to be the proprietor of anything in the world. Therefore, in the life of a householder, which is a sort of license for sex enjoyment, one must give in charity for the service of the Lord. Everyone's energy is generated or borrowed from the reservoir of energy of the Lord. Therefore, the resultant actions of such energy must be given to the Lord in the shape of transcendental loving service for Him. As the rivers draw water from the sea through the clouds and again go down to the sea, similarly, our energy is borrowed from the Supreme Source, the Lord's energy, and it must return to the Lord. That is the perfection of our energy. The Lord, therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita 9.27 says that whatever we do, whatever we undergo as penance, whatever we sacrifice, whatever we eat or whatever we give in charity must be offered to Him, the Lord. That is the way of utilizing our borrowed energy. When our energy is utilized in that way, our energy is purified from the contamination of material inebriaties, and thus we become fit for our original natural life of service to the Lord. Okay, so this is Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadapamam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sa Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadbhutam Parijana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Sa Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopeshwar Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchani Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhivaya Vacha Patitaram Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Nashta Prayesho Bhadresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Srinvatan Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Radayanti Stova Bhadrani Vidunoti Suto Sufam. So yes, it was we see long, really long purports.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, there are a couple of more paragraphs.
Oh, is it?
Yes, Prabhu.
Oh, so sorry.
No worries, Prabhu.
Yeah, I only discovered, I think, Dana Dharma. We yet to speak about Raja Dharma, Moksha Dharma, and Sthira Dharma, and Bhagavad Dharma. I'm so sorry. Apologies. So, Raja Dharma is a great science, unlike modern diplomacy for political supremacy. The kings were trained systematically to become munificent and not merely be tax collectors. They were trained to become different sacrifices. Sorry, they were trained to perform different sacrifices only for the prosperity of the subjects. To lead the prajas to the attainment of salvation was a great duty of the king. The father, the spiritual master, and the king are not to become irresponsible in the matter of leading their subjects to the path of ultimate liberation from birth, death, diseases, and old age. When these primary duties are properly discharged, there is no need of government, of the people, by the people. In modern days, the people in general occupy the administration by the strength of manipulated votes, but they are never trained in the primary duties of the king, and that is also not possible for everyone. Under the circumstances, the untrained administrators play havoc to make the subjects happy in all respects. On the other hand, these untrained administrators gradually become rogues and thieves and increase the taxation to finance a top-heavy administration that is useless for all purposes. Actually, the qualified brahmanas are meant to give direction to the kings for proper administration in terms of the scriptures like the Manu Samhita and Dharma Shastras of Parasara. A typical king is the ideal of the people in general, and if the king is pious, religious, chivalrous, and munificent, the citizens generally follow him. Such a king is not a lazy, sensuous person living at the cost of the subjects, but alert always to kill thieves and dacoits. The pious kings were not merciful to dacoits and thieves in the name of nonsensical ahimsa, non-violence. The thieves and dacoits were punished in an exemplary way so that in the future no one would dare commit such nuisances in an organized form. Such thieves and dacoits were never meant for administration as they are now. Now going back to taxation. The taxation law was simple. There was no force, no encroachment. The king had a right to take 1/4 of the production made by the subject. The king had a right to claim 1/4 of one's allotted wealth. One would never grudge parting with it because due to the pious king and religious harmony, there was enough natural wealth, namely grains, fruits, flowers, silk, cotton, milk, jewels, minerals, etc. And therefore, no one was materially unhappy. The citizens were rich in agriculture and animal husbandry, and therefore they had enough grains, fruits, and milk without any artificial needs of soaps and toilets, cinemas, and bars. That's an amazing one. The king had to see that the reserved energy of humanity was properly utilized. Human energy is meant not exactly for fulfilling animal propensities, but for self-realization. The whole government was specifically designed to fulfill this particular purpose. As such, the king had to select properly the cabinet ministers, but not on the strength of voting background. The ministers, the military commanders, and even the ordinary soldiers were all selected by personal qualifications, and the king had to supervise them properly before they were appointed to their respective posts. The king was especially vigilant to see that the tapasvis, or persons who sacrificed everything for disseminating spiritual knowledge, were never disregarded. The king knew well that the Supreme Personality of Godhead never tolerates any insult to his unalloyed devotees, again in italics. Such tapasvis were trusted leaders even of the rogues and thieves, who would never disobey the orders of tapasvis. The king would give special protection to illiterates, the helpless, and widows of the state. Defense measures were arranged previous to any attack by the enemies. The taxing process was easy and it was not meant for squandering, but was for strengthening the reserve fund. The reserve fund. The soldiers were recruited from all parts of the world and they were trained for special duties. So now it's moksha dharma. As far as salvation is concerned, one has to conquer the principles of lust, anger, unlawful desires, avarice, and bewilderment. To get freedom from anger, one should learn how to forgive. That's one for me. To be free from unlawful desires, one should not make plans. By spiritual culture, one is able to conquer sleep. By tolerance only, one can conquer desires and avarice. Disturbances from various diseases can be avoided by regulated diets. By self-control, one can be free from false hopes, and money can be saved by avoiding undesirable association. By practice of yoga, one can control hunger, and worldliness can be avoided by culturing the knowledge of impermanence. Dizziness can be conquered by rising up, and false arguments can be conquered by factual ascertainment. Talkativeness can be avoided by gravity and silence, and by prowess one can avoid fearfulness. Perfect knowledge can be obtained by self-cultivation. One must be free from lust, anger, dreaming, etc. to actually attain the path of salvation. Amazing. Prabhupada has written such amazing, really. As far as the women class are concerned, they are accepted as a power of inspiration for men. As such, women are more powerful than men. Here. Mighty Julius Caesar were controlled by Cleopatra. Such powerful women are controlled by shyness. Therefore, shyness is important for women. Once this control valve is loosened, women can create havoc in society by adultery. Adultery means production of unwanted children known as Varna Shankara, who disturb the world. The last item, now this is called Bhagavad Dharma actually. The last item taught by Bhishma was the process of pleasing the Lord. We are all eternal servants of the Lord. And when we forget this essential part of our nature, we are put into material conditions of life. The simple process of pleasing the Lord for the householders, especially, is to install the deity of the Lord at home. By concentrating on the deity, one may progressively go on with the daily routine work. Worshipping the deity at home, serving the devotee, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, residing in a holy place, and chanting the holy name of the Lord are all inexpensive items by which one can please the Lord. Thus, the subject matter was explained by the grandfather to his grandchildren. Amazing. I think Srila Prabhupada has already actually shared so much. I'm not sure what extra I'm going to say about it. I mean, the purports were really extensive, brief and detailed, and it was Prabhupada was such a genius to actually write so much in detail, really. And I'm happy I'm reading what Prabhupada has written, actually. Okay, so you see, 1.9.25 to 1.9.27, these three verses is all about Bhishma's instructions to Yudhishthira. The purports were easy to understand. They were simple, like you see. Let me think what I can add, actually. Okay, the name of this chapter is Passing Away of Bhishma Deva in the Presence of Krishna. When I was thinking about it, I was like, how amazing. You see, a jiva passing away while seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Where would he go? To the spiritual world. It happened 5,000 years back. So it is possible, really, even in this day and age, because we are in the golden age of Kali Yuga. So a jiva can see Krishna, right? Like our 6 Goswamis and the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If you see 500 years back, even pure devotees see Krishna these days. If you go to Vrindavan, you will hear many stories like this. How fortunate Bhishma Deva is. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that in the battlefield, Bhishma is more fortunate than Arjuna, because Arjuna sees the back in the battlefield of Krishna. You see, because he's fighting, and the charioteer is Krishna. So he only sees the back of Krishna. Whereas Bhishma, he sees the front of Krishna, he's Mukhmandal. So he's more fortunate. Our acharyas have such beautiful realizations. Bhishma was, if you see, 25,000 times more powerful than Arjuna. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada writes this in many other purports, and he was extraordinarily powerful. Bhishma wanted to see Krishna react in the battlefield. We all know that story, right? That's why he attacked Arjuna and Krishna too. And Krishna picked up the wheel to attack Bhishma. That's why he's called the wheel carrier in the purports. The sight was so pleasing to Bhishma. And if you see, when we talk about ras, this is virya ras, right? And for Kshatriyas like Bhishma, he wanted to see the virya ras from Krishna. And Kshatriyas, they get pleasure from this ras. And now, when he's about to pass away soon, Maharaj Yudhishthira asks him a question as per Krishna's instructions. The question was, what are the essential principles of religious duties? You see, in the previous verse, last week, Radhesham Prabhu explained it so amazingly. And Bhishma Dev says in the previous verse that, may the Lord await me when I'm leaving my body. Right? And Radhesham Prabhu explained last week what the intentions were of Yudhishthir, Krishna, and Bhishma Dev. He so beautifully explained it, right? So now at this point of time, it is clear that Bhishma Dev is going to leave his body. So that's why many great sages have arrived to hear from Bhishma Dev, and also to see a pure devotee is passing away. Krishna wanted to glorify his pure devotee. Hence, he asks Yudhishthir to ask questions to Bhishma Deva. Even though you see in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, there were so many personalities present, but Krishna wanted Bhishma Dev to speak. Think about this. The other personalities also heard from Vishnu Deva, right? Even though Bhishma Dev was involved in worldly affairs, but he was far superior than the sages. How beautiful this is, right? But even though Bhishma Dev had the boon to choose the time of his death, he had to go through the pain of being on the bed of arrows. You see, he had Ichha Mrityu, so he can die anytime, but still he had to go through that pain. Right? And one of the most beautiful things about Bhishma Deva was, even though he was in a lot of pain, you see so many arrows, the word is Sharapanjara. Srila Prabhupada described in a bed of arrows, but still his mind was in the right state. So much so that he was preaching on dharma and spiritual life. Who else we have seen doing that? Srila Prabhupada, you see, in his life, he was still translating his purports of the 10th canto when he was passing away, talking about several important spiritual topics, even though his body was about to leave, right? He was not eating, I think he was not eating for the past several days, but his consciousness was so pure, so clear. The minds of pure devotees are never contaminated. Their body may give it away, but they have a sound mind, even during their last stages of life, like Srila Prabhupada, Bhishma Dev. Srila Prabhupada then says in this purport that everything is happening as per the will of Krishna. Obviously, Krishna is glorifying his devotees. So just like devotees glorify Krishna all the time, in the same way, Krishna also glorifies his devotees. What a beautiful relationship it is. This is what reciprocation really means. You see, that's what the first verse, I talked about a little bit about the first verse. The second one, which is 9.9.26, it's really an amazing verse, pretty long purport, and there are so many points Prabhupada discussed, like multiple topics were discussed in this purport, right? The classification of Varna, the ashrama individuals, qualifications twofold, divisions. So Srila Prabhupada has divided the purports accordingly, right? First, he talks about the qualities of a civilized persons. Then he talks about the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Shudras, Vaishyas, and their different qualities. I attended an amazing class on YouTube, like in July or so, of Urmila Mataji, and she speaks about this verse, and that was just amazing. You see, Srila Prabhupada mostly writes about the Varna system in this purport, and he speaks about the 9 qualities that everyone should have. Then he delineates the specific qualities of each Varna. So I'll just let you know what Urmila Mataji said then, and it was just amazing. Okay, so the Varna in the purport. So what does Varna means actually? It means what one does for their livelihood, right? Their occupation. And there is different dharma for each category of varna, right? That's what Srila Prabhupada is writing in that. And we have so many classifications these days. If you look at the jobs these days, what are the jobs? Doctors, engineer, IT guys, banker, interpreter, coach, you see, finance, and all of that. Have you ever thought why Krishna classified everything into those four varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra? And think about it, because you see, Srila Prabhupada says in this purport that the idea of livelihood is to bring everyone into transcendence, right? You might be in any varna, but you have to move into transcendence in your own way, right? Everybody has to work, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. No one can maintain their body without work. One should work it in such a way that it brings them to transcendence, right? And the way that one's work brings one to transcendence is different to one's swabhava. That's why the word swabhava is used in the verse, right? Let's say if you work on something and someone else works on that, it could be different based on your own swabhava, according to one's own nature. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita as well that there's this verse in chapter 3, I don't remember the verse number. It says that do not jump into someone else's path, right? Even if it seems so much easier and better than yours. It is better to endure the difficulties of your own path, because to walk your own path means you work in that path, and someone else, if they walk in that path, it is dangerous for them, right? It's in that purport as well in Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada is hinting towards varnas. You see, you have your own swabhav, right? And that swabhav could fall under any of the four varnas. If you do work for other varnas, that is dangerous, right? In chapter 18 as well, Krishna says this. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. You see? Very, very beautiful verse. And when we understand these verses, we can understand ourselves. That's who I am. Okay, that's what I should be doing or should not be doing. We also come to deeply appreciate in these four divisions of varna, right? As to why the Lord has made these varna. We appreciate that. So why is it difficult for us to do someone else's job? Think about it. Let's say you are from one particular varna. Okay. So if you want to do someone else's varna, it's like you're acting, you have a different persona than your own, and you're trying to do someone else's job. See, even an actor can't be an actor all the time. It's exhausting. After the scene is shot, he's back to his own self. it's bhavaya. Okay. So when we do our work, we are satisfied. When I'm doing what I'm meant to do, I'm happy. This is our ultimate understanding of spiritual perfection, is it not? That I have awakened my eternal Swarupa and I serve Krishna in that Swarupa. That's what it means. If my eternal Swarup is being a cow, then I'm happy being a cow. If my eternal Swarup is being a cowherd boy, then I will be a cowherd boy. That we have a place in the world and it is only meant for us. And being the most perfect version of myself, which is my spiritual self. Okay. And that's even true in this world. So where we have a temporary identity in this material world, let's say if I'm the most perfected version of even my identity in this life, and I'm doing it for a higher purpose, and then I'm doing it for Krishna, then I'm perfect, right? If I do someone else's work, I'm no longer doing what's right for me. I'm no longer getting that intrinsic satisfaction of being who I am in my place in this universe. And Prabhupada says that each of us is a cell in this universal body. Right? If I'm no longer getting internal satisfaction, then I look for external satisfaction. Although I'm Anandamaya Bhyasat, I still look for satisfaction outside sometimes. You see, I look for it in external things, like how much money I'm paid, how much respect I'm giving, what my colleagues are like. These things are not under my control. Therefore, I'm always going to be afraid that my sources of satisfaction will not be there. We see this in our society and with devotees also, actually. You see, many times devotees are complaining and unsatisfied because of not being engaged in their nature. So there are, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purports that there are specific ways of problems if we do somebody else's work. Okay. So we know Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishyas and Shudras, right? These four varnas. But how do we understand in this modern context, right? We no longer see, it's all mixed and overlaps, right? So how do we understand? So, you know, that class I was talking about, Urmila Mataji, she said that just imagine someone who is inclined to the field of ideas, they are Brahmanas, right? Who are Kshatriyas, who work in government. You know, they redistribute the people's own wealth and they look for society in general. Who are Vaishyas, who work in the field of resources, right? They generate new wealth or usable wealth. And who are the Shudras? Artistry. So these are the four things that she said. Inclined to the field of ideas, works in government, resources, and artistry. Now imagine when there's a mix-up. When I'm saying mix-up, let's say mix-up between government, Kshatriyas, and resources, Vaishyas. So if Kshatriyas do the work of Vaishyas and Vaishyas do the work of Kshatriyas, I mean, this is in the purport as well. So Vaishyas and Shudras working as Kshatriyas. Resources people, they think that the government is foolishly generous, and the government thinks that those in resources are too profit-minded. Apologies if you can't understand it, please forgive me. It was just an amazing class and I could gather as little as I could. But how beautifully she's described, like how do we understand in this modern world? The Brahmanas are the ones who are inclined to ideas. The Kshatriyas are the one, let's say, who work in the government. The Vaishyas are those who have a lot of resources or manage resources. And Shudras are in the field of artistry, right? So Vaishyas working in government, they would tend to focus on the special industry of their own industry, right? Government is supposed to focus on long-term interest of the people, but the Vaishyas, they work for their own interest. That's why you have those corruption scams. So this is just an example as to how, if one varna, let's say you are from a particular varna, but you work in some other varna, it is dangerous, right? That's what Prabhupada writes, it's dangerous. And there are so many examples, like government people, you said if they work in resources, they will work for a fair price, and that may result in failure of the business. And you know what I'm trying to understand. In the same way, we can kind of mix up a lot of other stuff like Kshatriyas and Brahmanas, okay? Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. You see, think of it, the ideas people, like Brahmanas people, they're working in the ideas people. Imagine them taking the role of Kshatriyas and working in government. You see, they have a natural detachment from fame and honor. I'm talking about the Brahmanas, right? Now, when they start working as Kshatriyas, they may find it difficult to energize people, I mean, patriotically. In the same way, Kshatriyas working as Brahmanas, let's say government working as ideas. So they may impose hierarchy because that's what is in government. And they may be discouraged by Vairagya. They need fame. They will skew truth in order to get fame, and then it's dangerous. So I'm just giving these examples, really. Think of ideas and resources. Ideas people, Brahmanas, they will abhor resources, right? Because resources people, they're most materialistic, right? And resources in ideas will find it useless and impractical and try to cut corners. Corruption again. One example is the pharmaceutical companies funding research. Right? Pharmaceutical companies funding research for their own benefit and creating a lot of pills, sometimes unnecessary as well. Right? I mean, I can go into all these examples, but I hope you're just getting the idea, right? So this is what the second purport is all about. You see varnas, what each varna means. What happens if you mix these varnas? So we must think that which varna I am in. Okay, I think ideas, government, resources, artistry. Okay, which varna I am in, and am I working in that varna? If not, what's happening to me? If I'm having problems, am I really belong to this varna? I mean, this is what Urmila Mataji's presentation was all about. It was just amazing. I think she's writing a book as well. I don't remember the name of the book. It's not published so yet. She's writing it with Rukmini Devidasi, and it's going to come out soon, so we must read it. All right, so what else Srila Prabhupada discuss in this purport? I think we've covered most of it, if not all of it. And you see, the talk about Brahmanas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and Kshatriyas, Krishna has already done in Bhagavad Gita. I see in 4.13 he says, Chaturvaranya Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. So I have created these divisions, right? So Bhishma Dev is also going to describe these divisions soon. And in chapter 18, Krishna recites some verses beautifully. He recites, I think, 3 verses about all these 4 varnas. Samo damah tapo socham shanti rajam evacham jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahma karma subhavacham. He just says this, these are the qualities of a Brahmana. Samo damah tapo socham, right? Cleanliness, religiousness, honesty, then sense control. These are the qualities of Brahmana. Kshatriya, he says, Shauryam tejo dhritir daksham yudhe chape palayanam danam ishvara bhavascha shatra karma subhavajam. So Kshatriyas are who give charity, do not take charity. Shauryam, which means they're really brave and courageous. And Yuddhe Chapeya Palayanam, which means that they do not run away from a battle, right? Then Krishna talks in chapter 18, I think it's 18.42, 43, 44. Again, I'm wrong, I'm so sorry. For Vaishyas, he says, Krishi Goraksha Vanijyam Vaishya Karma Swabhavajam, which means agricultural work, Goraksha, taking care of animals and cows, Vanijyam, which means business. Okay, that is Vaishya Karma Swabhavajam. And in the end, in the same verse, he says, Paricharyatmakam karmam Shudrasyapi Swabhavajam, which means those who want to help others, those who have a tendency of helping others, they are Shudras. Okay, it's not a mean word at all. Just like Urmila Mataji says, artistry. What a beautiful way she has described. And the caste system and Varna, they're quite different. That's not in the scope of our discussion today, so I'll not discuss that some other time maybe. So we'll move on to the next verse. I'm sorry if I'm blabbering a lot. Sometimes it is difficult for people to understand. People have told me that, sometimes I blabber a lot and people can't understand. If that is the case, please let me know if I have to go slow, if I have to go fast. So in the last purport, you see, we have 2 Kshatriyas, Maharaj Yudhishthira and Bhishma Dev. They're talking about worldly topics. I mean, worldly topics as in not to engage in sense gratification, but let's say managing the material world in relationship to Krishna consciousness. That's why the word dharma is added so many times. Dana dharma, moksha dharma, raja dharma, stri dharma. The dharma that I missed reading. And the last purport was about varna dharma. Okay, we discussed all about varna. And this verse is also really amazing, we understand. Srila Prabhupada has explained everything in the purport before even Bhishma Deva was much. How merciful he is. So yeah, so the purport begins with an explanation of Dana Dharma. Each subsequent paragraph in the purport explains the other topics like Dana Dharma, Raja Dharma, then Moksha Dharma, Stri Dharma, and Bhagavad Dharma, right? So what is Dana Dharma? Dana means charity, right? So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada has said that a Grihastha should give 50% of what he has. I'm not sure how much we're doing, but yeah, this is what he said. And for a Brahmachari, what is Dana Dharma? For a Brahmachari, whatever he gets, so he's taught to get everything from his senior devotees. But for a Brahmachari, charity is to devote everything to his guru. So that is the beginning of no proprietorship. If the guru gives him back, then it's another thing. But a brahmachari should, whatever he gets, should offer it back to his spiritual master and use it for purposes of Krishna consciousness. You see, everything belongs to the Lord, right? So whatever we do, it must be for the service of the Lord. And I think it's Srimad Bhagavatam, in the purport as well, it's just mentioned, Yat Karoshi Yad Ashnashi Yad Juosi Dadashi Yat Tapashashi Konti Yat Tat Karushva Padarpanam, which means whatever we do, whatever we eat, whatever we offer or give away, and whatever austerities we perform, we have to do that for Krishna. Krishna says to Arjuna, "O son of Kunti, do that as an offering to me." As an offering to me. So whatever you do that as an offering to Krishna. Which means nothing belongs to me, right? The more I possess, the less I have. So what does that mean? Two things. Nothing belongs to me. The more I possess, the less I have. These two things, if we remember, we can do charity. But materialistic culture, it teaches the opposite. It's like the more I possess, the better I am, the happier I am, right? Which is not true. Everyone has something or the other way of collecting things. The more I have, the more I will think about them, and I will have less time for Krishna, right? Meaning the less of my spiritual nature can I use, and I'll be engaged in materialistic activities. But if we have less, we have more time for Krishna. So that's the meaning of the more I possess, the less I have. One needs to have these two things to be charitable, like I said earlier, because nothing belongs to us. The more I possess, the less I have. Sometimes as devotees, when we listen to some classes, we talk about it, right? And when we are asked about the source, we don't tell the source. Think about it. Let's say you hear from someone, let's say from me, and if I'm saying something, and if someone asks me, where did you get that from? And I say, you know what, I don't remember, or I heard it from my class and all of that. Actually, I do that sometimes because I'm forgetful. So that is the mentality of hoarding. You see, you take someone else's work and you say that's yours. That's a mentality of hoarding. Even it happens sometimes. So Srila Prabhupada has said that in many purports that we should not do that. But on the contrary, a Brahmana ensures that the knowledge he gives someone must be worthy of it. He has no inhibitions. That's the mood in which the devotees of the Lord function. And the biggest charity is the charity of the knowledge, right? And for a grihastha, actually, charity is must. Otherwise, Srila Prabhupada says something in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3. He says, my dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. I was just reading a purport of 3.16. So one must give charity if you're a grihastha. That's Srila Prabhupada has said that. And we should give charity. And what is the greatest charity in these days? Charity to institutions like ISKCON, you see, because if you see, ISKCON has been really good in utilizing the money. They publish their finances as to what they're doing, right? Not every institution does that. ISKCON does that. Like in our temple as well, you see, every year Pradyumna Prabhu goes through it. I think last time it was in 2020, and he goes through everything, okay, what is happening and what we are doing. That happens in every temple, okay? But I've been to other temples and other religious institutions, and I haven't heard of it. The devotees, they haven't heard of it. So it is good, something about ISKCON, really, you should understand it. And one thing we should not do in our life is to be unproductive. We should not waste a moment's time in this material world and engage in Krishna's service. Yes, sometimes what happens is because of being in contact with this material nature, we do tend to waste time. That happens with me as well. There's something amazing that I read in the purport. You see, when Srila Prabhupada, when he talks about all of that, he does not speak of money. You see that he speaks of energy, right? Which includes everything like money, time, and everything, right? So this is about Dana Dharma. Raja Dharma, what is Raja Dharma? It's like If there is a father in the home, there's a teacher in the school, if there is a king in the government working for the spiritual elevation of their subjects, we don't need a government for the people, by the people. That's what Srila Prabhupada says. And a king has to try to make a king should not try to make the subjects happy all the time. Like a typical politician, he promises, right? Because that creates havoc. That's what is happening now in India these days. You see politicians, they try to appease everyone by giving some goodies, subsidies, and all of that. But it really, long term, it doesn't really work. And Srila Prabhupada is conveying the ideas in this purport according to current time, place, and circumstance. The Brahmana should guide the Kshatriyas. Ideally, the thieves and the dacoits should be punished by the king, and they should not become a king like these days. Prabhupada has also spoken about taxation laws, that the king had a right to take all of those production. These days, the taxation laws are so weird, really. I mean, that's why you see a lot of people evade taxes, because they see that the king or the prime minister or the president is not just and fair. That's why they think, he is not going to do anything for us. He's mired with corruption cases. That's why you have these tax evasion cases. People are not happy with the government. And like I said earlier, ISKCON temple is really, really amazing in handling wealth and utilizing it properly. And if you see ISKCON temples, I really love the idea that they show the tangible results of the last particular year as to what happened in that particular year, tangible ones. And it's so beautiful to see that. I have not seen it anywhere. And Srila Prabhupada says that we should be righteous and fair, and we should make the taxing process easy. But let's see when it happens. The more people are spiritual minded, they will better understand what taxation laws really are. So this was about Rajadharma. What is Moksha Dharma? Moksha Dharma is not about merging in transcendence, merging with the God. It's not about that. It's let's say what are the dharma for religiousness or transcendence. Okay. One very important thing about Moksha Dharma is we have to conquer our anarthas for moksha. Moksha is not in that context, in this Moksha Dharma context. Okay. So there are a lot of verses I could have shared, but it's already time now. It's Narad Muni speak to Yudhishthira Maharaj in chapter 15 of Canto 7, and there is 4 verses that he shares. But yeah, we understand what Moksha Dharma is. It's about what are the good qualities one should have. We should not have any anarthas. Okay, those 9 processes, 9 stages of bhakti that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes, we should also go for that. Adho Shraddha, Bhajan Kriya, Sadhu Sangha, and all of that. Have you noticed that one paragraph of Srila Prabhupada is so strong that it can change lives? I've never read such quality literature, really. This is why we should distribute such books. And in this month, it's extremely important to do so. It's December marathon month, and we must try our best. I think we are doing this in Hamilton. Let's see, when we come out of isolation, we'll try to do so. This is just amazing. I read a book, I saw a book once, which is called, oh God, I can't forget. I've completely forgotten. So it was based on Atyahara. You see, Atyahara, complete book is based on that. The Joy of Having Less, written by someone called Miss Minimalist. Okay, so she obviously took everything for one word, Atyahara. So that's why I'm saying one word, one paragraph can actually change lives of people. Okay, it's 8:47. I'll very quickly go through the Stri Dharma and Bhagavad Dharma. What is the Stri Dharma? One of the beautiful things Prabhupada has written is women are very powerful. They are the power of inspiration for men. I wish my wife was there. She must have been really happy. Prabhupada talks about something called shyness. You see, shyness, it manifests in modesty. That's why it is very important quality. Again, I had a very important class. I just want to share something. You see, when people discuss this a lot in ISKCON as well, that women are prohibited in doing a lot of things, and they're told don't do that, don't do this. But I was listening to one lecture where the Prabhuji said that it's not prohibited, it's relieved. You see, women, they are very simple, they are very much keen to, it's very easy for them to do bhakti. That's why they're relieved of many, many complex tasks. So let's not think that they are prohibited. Stri dharma is about doing certain things. And the most important thing is shyness, like Srila Prabhupada said, but it's also about being relieved of so many complex things that the men have to do. The last one is Bhagavad Dharma. Bhagavad Dharma, we know. You see, this is the last item explained by Bhishma Deva. Prabhupada makes it so personal in that purport. If you see the last line I was reading, he says a grandfather is explaining this to children. And studying Srimad Bhagavatam is Bhagavad Dharma. Doing things that is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam is Bhagavad Dharma. And Srila Prabhupada then ends it by the 5 items of Bhakti Yoga. This is mentioned by Rupa Goswami as well. Sadhu Sangha, Namakirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, Mathura Vas, Srimurtira, Shraddhaya Sevan, which means you should be in association, you should chant and do Harinam Sankirtan, you should keep hearing, you should live in a dham, and you should worship deities. These are the 5, which is also called Panchang Bhakti sometimes. These are the 5 items of devotional service that you should always engage in. Obviously, you can't go to dham, but make your house a dham, your temple is your dham. So yeah, this is everything from me, Prabhu. But yes, one last thing. These 3 verses are all about Bhishma Dev speaking to Arjuna, right? In the next verses, I think Bhishma Dev will have some prayers. Those are the most amazing ones, so please don't miss. We are trying to get more speakers as well. Prabhupada said something amazing, and I will try to end this class by this. Let there be a attachment, okay? But Bhishma Dev, he keeps saying, let there be attachment despite having attachment, right? That is why the prayers of Bhishma Dev are so important for us to know. So please attend the classes. We have some amazing speakers, which we will share soon. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. If you have any questions, suggestions, comment, please go through. Please let me know. If I can't answer them, there are others who will do it. Pradyum Prabhu has written something. Okay. These are really powerful purports. Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you so much. They are really, really very, very powerful purports. Anyone, any suggestions? If you want to share anything.
Hare Krishna, Santosh Prabhu.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you again for a lot of energy, a lot of insight, and a lot of enthusiasm. Really appreciate that quality in you when you speak about Srimad Bhagavatam. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
You were referring to the presentation by Mother Urmila on Varnashram. It's quite a enlightening presentation, probably the best that we actually have in terms of practicality in that I've seen in ISKCON. And just to comment on that, we've taken her presentation and made it into a module for our Year 9 students at Avanti Fields when we study Varnashram. And the key point in understanding Varnashram, even before you understand what does the Brahmana do, what does this, is first of all understanding what is the individual nature of a person. And this whole idea of mixing Varna and the catastrophe that it causes, a Vaishya becoming a president of a country creates havoc, because the Vaishya only thinks about making money, and especially when they think about making money for themselves, then becoming a prime minister or becoming a head of state and so on, that's all they can think about, because that's their nature. So the whole concern of mixing and trying to do someone else's job is that the work or the varna is defined by the nature, and the nature is attracted to a certain activity. And when you when you situate yourself in a position or an environment of activity that's not suited to your nature, that's when it becomes catastrophic.
Right.
And when we see people, just in regular society, we see people, how many times they change, their career path, how many times they kind of, oh, this job doesn't really work for me. Even if the money is there, it doesn't work for you because the nature is not aligned to the activity.
Right.
So that's, and when Krishna explains it in Bhagavad Gita, he emphasizes guna karma, the guna, the nature of the person is very, 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 very crucial. And the other two words that allow us to really appreciate, I mean, Srila Prabhupada's purport on each of the qualities and characteristics and duties of the Varnas, when they combine, the purpose of the Varnashram is two words, very powerful, insightful words. And that is sustainable prosperity. Varnashram creates sustainable prosperity. And as Srila Prabhupada mentions, nobody is in a position, the Sudras are taken care of, the Vaishyas are taken care of, the Kshatriyas, they are caring, but acting according to their nature, they are prosperous. The Brahmanas are cared for and therefore are prosperous. So it's been we actually just delivered a year 9 module on this. And just for 13, 14-year-olds to think, do we have a society today that is sustainably prosperous? And the sad answer is no, because people are not cared for, people are not, so there's a lot of gaps, and those gaps are because of self-centeredness and taking those natures and taking those work activities and only thinking about it in terms of, I have to provide for myself, I have to provide for my family.
Right.
And it stops there. But Varnashram is the fundamental principle of charity, fundamental principle of, in today's words, a win-win. If I win, then I have to make sure somebody else wins. And that way we maintain the quality of work, and we maintain. So it's a fascinating presentation that Mataji has done, and it's so practical. And even the idea of charity is not just based on giving money, but the idea of charity is giving wealth. And we separate the idea of wealth and money, because wealth, if we think about Sadaishwarya, the 6 opulences, wealth, we all have knowledge, strength, beauty, renunciation, and so on. That is, we all have little bits of those wealth. And when we share that wealth, when we share the wealth of knowledge, we share the wealth of strength to protect someone or offer compassion. When we share the wealth of certain possession or items that we may have, as well as sharing the wealth of money. So it's very broad context of how we can engage in this act of charity as grihastas in so many different ways. So yeah, Mataji, Urmila Mataji has done an amazing piece of work, and thank you for drawing attention to that, because it is very, very profound for today's modern era of understanding nature and being well situated in the complexity of today's society with Krishna consciousness to do our best in the various working activities that we need to do as part of fulfilling our grihasta duties. So thank you for highlighting that very important piece of work that she has done.
Thank you, Prabhu. Do we know when the book is coming out?
I heard 2 years ago. I think she came to Leicester maybe 2019, and we spoke about it then. And my key response to her was that we'd be keen to kind running workshops from it and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know what's actually happened. So yeah, hopefully we'll find out soon and see what happens with that. But it will be a very important contribution, that book.
Yes, yes. I really liked when you said sustainable prosperity. It's just amazing. Very, very powerful word, Prabhuji. I'm happy that the year 9s are going to learn that. And yes, it was really, really powerful. The moment I heard of it, it was like, wow, I haven't heard of this from anyone, and it is so good if everyone learns about it. Thank you, Pradyumna Prabhu, for talking so much in Bhagavatam class. We need more of you.
Yeah, no, sorry for talking too much. It was
No, not at all. I said
great
we
to
need
hear
more of you.
that reference.
No, we need that, Prabhuji. Honestly, we need your inspiration. We need that you are here and telling us what is right. And yes, it struck a chord with me as well, that the presentation. So thank you so much, Prabhuji. Anyone else, please?
Hare Krishna, this is Manu Das. Please accept my
Manu Prabhu.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Pradyumna Prabhu, for beautiful summarizing of the Varnashram structure. And the natures, how it affects. Another thing I was thinking about yesterday when I was reading Canto 7, there is a mention of a Grahastha Dharma. And I was deep diving into it, that how a Grahastha is supposed to maintain the other 3 Varnas, ashrams. And so Sannyasi, Brahmachari, Vanaprasthi, they are not supposed to be earning money at all, according to our Shastras. And Grahastha must be supporting them in any and every need that they have, so that they can then propagate the mission of life of going back to Godhead in the society and facilitate everybody into that direction. What we see in today's world is a very topsy-turvy situation. Not only that a Grahastha is working very, very hard just to maintain themselves, but everybody else is working very, very hard. And not only that a Grahastha man is working hard, even the woman is working very, very hard. So the whole modality of the modern world, which is kind of hinged upon sort of communist government in some sense, because government, for example, is taking control of so many finances and distributing in some way or the other. Somewhere it is hard communist countries and somewhere it's soft communist countries in the garb of democracy. But their government is then driving their agendas and not the agendas of the Shastra, because government is ruled by the Sudras. And therefore, we see that there is no room to propagate or have this sustainable prosperity under the umbrella of Varnashram system or dharma, which Krishna has given to us. So it's a very, very a pathetic situation that we are stuck into. And as a society, we are trying in our own little ways, some way or the other, and this is the mission that Srila Prabhupada has left behind. How do we establish this entire agrarian economy where Grahastha is a communist? He looks after everybody. And by doing that, I was even reading this one powerful line that if you have collected more money than required, you will be considered as thief to Grahasthas. You must give it back to the to other 3 ashrams and for the cause of propagating dharma. So that was something I was thinking and contemplating as Pradyumna Prabhu was giving details, and quite happy to learn that in early childhood, if children can get this knowledge, maybe they will then follow their career path based on their nature rather than based on the wishful thinking of earning more money, and where it looks lucrative, but they'll be suffering in the future. So thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. So I have a question actually. You see, we see a lot of Brahmanas today. They're not actually Brahmanas. So what could be the reason? Is it because the Grihasthas are not funding them properly? Or is it because they're in a wrong Varna, or both? Maybe Pradyumna Prabhu.
Pradyumna Prabhu, please.
Well, Brahmana, Brahmana is not a surname or my father was a Brahmin priest or anything like that. We know. So today in society, we have people who are Brahmanas, who are priests and so on. And they're economically driven. They're not necessarily driven for the purpose, the first purpose, which is to impart knowledge and guide people on the spiritual path. And because they've been born into and cultivated a different nature to that of what's required and described of a Brahmana in the Gita. Mm-hmm. If a person doesn't like to study and they're made to study and be qualities of Brahmana, if that nature isn't there, then it's not going to work. So the important thing is, whichever varna, for whichever person, is to understand nature. And that's how we do that. I mean, it becomes a challenge for us as parents. I want my son to be an engineer. I want my son to be a doctor. I want my son to be this. Then they'll be well established. Then they'll be, whatever. Oh, you mustn't do artistry. It'll ruin the family name. Why do you want to be a carpenter and a furniture maker? That's just so lowly. I mean, you need to have a reputation in society. So we can miss this idea that my child has a particular nature, and how can we? And if we situate the child or situate the person in a particular nature that's suited to them, that is aligned to them, they will be happy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They will be happy. Why do people change careers? Because even if they're paying a lot of money, the money is not what's going to make us happy. Being aligned to the nature. And then don't forget, I mean, that's just from a material point of view, that we're aligned to a nature and we do that kind of work. We're meant to then be in a place that allows us to go even further in purifying that nature, so that we can enter, the spiritual dimension of our true essence and true self. Mm-hmm. So it does become complicated because society is complicated. Society is based on, whoever has the most wealth is the most successful. Mm. And this word success is at the heart of this complexity, because we define success from a material point of view. Oh, here is a successful man. Yeah. What does that really mean? Well, it means he has wealth specifically of money. Yeah. And he has a position, and he has, a whole bunch of resources. So I think that not only there are so many Brahmanas, as you say, who are not kind of qualified, or so many of this or so many of that. You look at every field of work, there's qualification and disqualification, because the motivation and the purpose is misaligned to nature and misaligned to the overall contribution to society's welfare. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we do have to, Manu Prabhu's point about, how do we do this? We have to be careful. How are we doing it for ourselves? How do we do it for those who are dependent on us, our children and others? How do we do it for them? And being happy that we do something that's linked to and directed and connected to their nature, rather than instilling in them the false material ambition or the false sense of success and security of the material world. Right. I mean, it's a complex discussion.
Happy to have a discussion with you, Prabhu. But yes, it's 7 minutes past 9. So if anyone doesn't have any questions, we would like to end this here. Karuna Prabhu. Okay, let's end this here then. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Krishna, thank you.
Jai.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Krishna, thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Prabhu ki Jai.
Right.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. It's wonderful.
all your discussions and points. Very encouraging, very enlightening, very inspiring. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Rishit Karthika Mataji.